The Titanic, the night the unsinkable ship sank. Chapter 1. A ship like no other. In the early 1900s, people loved big and powerful machines. Trains grew faster, cars became popular, and ships grew bigger every year. In the city of Belfast, in Northern Ireland, workers were building something amazing. It was a huge ship called the Titanic. Belfast was a busy city at that time. Its streets were full of noise and smoke. Thousands of workers walked to the shipyard every morning. A shipyard is a place where big ships are built. The company that built the Titanic was called Harland and Wolff. This company was famous for building strong, beautiful ships. The Titanic was not just big, it was the biggest ship in the world. It was almost 270 meters long. That is longer than 2 football fields. The ship had 9 decks. A deck is a floor on a ship. It had swimming pools, restaurants, and even a gym. Rich passengers could enjoy fine food and beautiful rooms. The Titanic felt more like a floating hotel than a ship. People called the Titanic unsinkable. This means they believed it could never sink. The ship had 16 watertight compartments. A compartment is a separate closed space inside the ship. If water came into one compartment, the other compartments would stay dry. Engineers believed this design made the ship completely safe. Building the Titanic took almost 3 years. Thousands of workers helped build it. Many of these workers were poor men from Belfast. The work was hard and dangerous. Some workers were hurt. A few even died during construction. But most people were proud of the ship. It showed the power of modern technology. Finally, in the spring of 1912, the Titanic was ready. It was time for its first journey. This first journey is called a maiden voyage. The Titanic would sail from Southampton, England, to New York City in the United States. Many important people bought tickets for this trip. They wanted to be part of history. The ship carried different types of passengers. First-class passengers were very rich. They had beautiful rooms and delicious food. Second-class passengers were usually middle-class families. Third-class passengers were often poor people. Many of them were moving to America to start a new life. They dreamed of better jobs and a brighter future. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic left Southampton. Crowds of people came to watch. They waved and cheered. Bands played happy music. Everyone felt excited. Nobody imagined what would happen just a few days later. The ship stopped in France and then in Ireland to pick up more passengers. Many Irish families boarded the ship in a small town called Queenstown. Some of them carried everything they owned in one small bag. They were leaving their homeland forever, hoping for a new start across the ocean. After that, the Titanic sailed out into the open Atlantic Ocean. The captain of the ship was Edward Smith. He was an experienced sailor. He had worked at sea for over 40 years. Sailors and passengers trusted him completely. This was supposed to be his final voyage before he retired. Everyone expected a calm, easy trip, a perfect ending to his long career. Life on board felt wonderful in those first days. Passengers walked on the decks and enjoyed the fresh sea air. Children played games. Musicians played beautiful music in the evenings. First-class passengers ate elegant dinners with many courses. Everyone felt safe and happy. The great ship moved smoothly across the calm ocean. But the ocean in April can be dangerous. Icebergs often float in that area at that time of year. An iceberg is a huge piece of ice floating in the sea. Some icebergs are as big as buildings. Ships in the area sent warnings about ice ahead. The crew on the Titanic received several of these warnings, but the ship continued at a fast speed through the dark, cold night. Chapter 2. Speed across the ocean. Captain Smith wanted to arrive in New York quickly. A fast arrival would bring good publicity for the shipping company. The company was called White Star Line. They wanted the world to see how modern and fast their new ship was. So the Titanic sailed at a high speed, even at night. The night of April 14th was very calm. The ocean was flat and still. There was no wind. This might sound peaceful, but it was actually dangerous. Without wind, there were no waves breaking against icebergs. This made icebergs much harder to see in the dark. Two crew members worked in the crow's nest that night. The crow's nest is a small lookout point high on the ship. Their names were Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee. Their job was to watch for danger ahead, but they had no binoculars that night. Binoculars are tools that help people see far away. Someone had accidentally locked them away before the trip began. At around 11:40 at night, Fleet stared into the darkness ahead. Suddenly, he saw something huge and black rising from the sea. It was an iceberg, much bigger than the ship's lookout tower. His heart raced. He rang a warning bell 3 times, as fast as he could. Then he grabbed the telephone and called down to the officers below. "Iceberg! Right ahead!" he shouted. The officers tried to turn the ship quickly. They also tried to stop the engines. But the Titanic was too big and moving too fast. It could not turn in time. The side of the ship scraped against the iceberg. The collision did not seem violent at first. Many passengers did not even feel it. But under the water, the damage was terrible. The iceberg tore open several compartments along the ship's side. Remember, the ship was designed to survive damage to a few compartments. But this iceberg damaged too many at once. Water began rushing into the ship. At first, most passengers were not worried. Some even laughed and picked up pieces of ice that had landed on the deck. They thought it was exciting. They did not understand how serious the damage was. But the ship's engineers understood immediately. They knew the Titanic was going to sink. Captain Smith received the terrible news quickly. He walked through the ship to see the damage himself. Water was already flooding into the lower decks. He understood there was very little time left. He gave the order to prepare the lifeboats. A lifeboat is a small boat used to escape a sinking ship. Sadly, the Titanic did not have enough lifeboats for everyone on board. The ship could carry over 2,200 people, but the lifeboats could only hold about 1,178 people. This was actually more than the safety rules required at that time, but it was still far too few. The crew began to wake up passengers and lead them to the lifeboats. At first, many people did not want to leave the warm, comfortable ship. The night was freezing cold outside. The small lifeboats looked much less safe than the giant Titanic. Some passengers refused to get in the boats at first. The crew followed an old ocean tradition. They said, "Women and children first." This meant women and children got seats in the lifeboats before men. Many husbands said goodbye to their wives and children. They believed they would follow later in other boats. Sadly, many of these men never saw their families again. Chapter 3. Fear in the Dark. As the night continued, the situation grew more frightening. The front of the ship began to sink lower into the water. Passengers realized this was not a small accident. This was a true disaster. Panic slowly spread through the crowd. Some lifeboats left the ship only partly full. One boat that could carry 65 people left with only 12 on board. People did not fully understand how dangerous the situation truly was. They worried more about the small boats tipping over than about the giant ship sinking. This terrible mistake meant that hundreds of empty seats went to waste that night. Later, survivors would look back and feel deep sadness about every empty seat lost in the darkness. The ship's musicians kept playing music the whole time. They wanted to keep passengers calm. Their bravery became one of the most famous stories from that night. They continued playing even as the ship tilted more and more. None of the musicians survived. Third-class passengers faced special difficulties that night. Their rooms were deep inside the lower decks. The pathways to the lifeboats were confusing and far away. Some gates and doors were locked, separating different passenger classes. Because of this, far fewer third-class passengers survived compared to first-class passengers. Family relationships were tested in painful ways that night. Some men tried to disguise themselves as women to get onto lifeboats. Most crew members refused to allow this. Other men bravely stepped back, giving their seats to strangers. Real love and real fear showed themselves side by side. One famous story from that night involves a wealthy couple named Isidore and Ida Strauss. Isidore was offered a seat because of his age, but he refused to take a place before other men did. His wife, Ida, refused to leave without him. She said she would stay by her husband's side no matter what. They died together on the ship. By around 1:30 in the morning, most lifeboats had already left the ship. The Titanic was tilting steeply now. Furniture and dishes slid across the floors. Passengers who remained on board began to feel true terror. The freezing ocean water was rising quickly through the ship. The crew worked desperately to keep order. Officers used their authority, and sometimes weapons, to prevent panic among the remaining crowd. Most passengers, though frightened, tried to stay calm and dignified. Many people prayed together. Others simply held their loved ones close. The temperature outside was far below freezing. The ocean water was even colder, close to 0 degrees. Anyone who fell into that water would only survive for a few minutes. This cold water would soon become the greatest danger of all, more deadly than the sinking itself. As the final lifeboats rowed away from the ship, passengers left behind looked back at the enormous Titanic. Its lights still shone brightly across the black ocean. It seemed impossible that something so massive could actually disappear beneath the waves. But that is exactly what was about to happen. Chapter 4. The Final Hour. At around 2 o'clock in the morning, the front of the Titanic sank completely underwater. The back of the ship rose high into the air. For a moment, the enormous ship stood almost straight up, pointing toward the stars. People still on board slid or fell toward the icy ocean. Some jumped, hoping to swim away from the ship. Others held onto railings, trying to stay as high as possible for as long as they could. Then, with a terrible sound, the ship broke apart in the middle. The front and back sections separated. Both pieces sank quickly into the dark Atlantic Ocean. At 2:20 in the morning, the Titanic disappeared completely beneath the waves. Hundreds of people were now in the freezing water. They screamed for help. Sadly, most nearby lifeboats did not go back to rescue them. People in the boats feared their small boats would be overwhelmed by desperate swimmers. Only a few lifeboats returned to search for survivors, but by then, it was already too late for most. The cold water killed people within minutes. Their bodies simply could not survive such extreme cold. By the time rescue ships arrived, almost everyone in the water had already died. A ship called the Carpathia received the Titanic's distress signals. A distress signal is a message asking for emergency help. The Carpathia rushed toward the location as fast as it could. It arrived at around 4 o'clock in the morning, almost 2 hours after the Titanic sank. The crew of the Carpathia worked quickly and carefully. They pulled survivors up from the small, freezing lifeboats one by one. They wrapped them in warm blankets and gave them hot drinks to help them warm up. Many survivors were silent, still frozen with shock and fear. Some had lost entire families in just one terrible night. Mothers searched desperately for children. Wives called out the names of husbands who would never answer. The Carpathia carried about 705 survivors safely to New York City, where huge crowds waited anxiously at the harbor. More than 1,500 people died that night. It remains one of the deadliest peacetime disasters in ocean history. News of the tragedy shocked the entire world. Newspapers everywhere printed the story on their front pages. People could not believe that the Unsinkable ship had sunk on its very first voyage. Governments quickly began investigating what had gone wrong. They discovered many serious mistakes. There were not nearly enough lifeboats. Safety rules were badly outdated. Warnings about ice had been ignored. After the disaster, countries created new international safety laws for ships. Every ship was now required to carry enough lifeboats for all passengers. Ships also had to keep their radios working at all times, listening constantly for danger. Today, more than 100 years later, people still remember the Titanic. Its story has become one of the most famous events in history. Books, movies, and museums continue to share its story with new generations. Why does this event still touch our hearts so deeply? Perhaps it is because the Titanic represents both human pride and human weakness. People believed their technology made them invincible. The disaster reminded everyone that nature is far more powerful than any machine humans can build. The Titanic also reminds us of human courage and love. Musicians who kept playing to calm frightened passengers. A husband and wife who chose to face death together. Crew members who gave their lives trying to save others. These stories of bravery still inspire people today. In 1985, explorers finally found the wreck of the Titanic. It rests deep on the ocean floor, about 3,800 meters below the surface. Scientists have studied it carefully, learning even more about that tragic night. The ship itself is slowly breaking down under the pressure of the deep ocean. But the story it left behind will never disappear. The Titanic teaches us an important lesson. We must always respect the power of nature. We must never let pride blind us to real danger. And in our darkest moments, kindness and courage matter more than anything else. Vocabulary Review. Let's review 8 important words from our story today. The first word is shipyard. A shipyard is a place where workers build and repair large ships. In our story, thousands of workers walk to the shipyard every morning in Belfast. The second word is voyage. A voyage is a long journey, usually by sea. The Titanic's first voyage was called a maiden voyage. The third word is iceberg. An iceberg is a huge piece of ice floating in the ocean. Some icebergs are as big as buildings, and one of them hit the Titanic. The fourth word is compartment. A compartment is a separate, closed space inside something bigger, like a ship. The Titanic had 16 watertight compartments to keep water out. The fifth word is lifeboat. A lifeboat is a small boat used to escape from a sinking ship. Sadly, the Titanic did not have enough lifeboats for every passenger. The sixth word is collision. A collision happens when two things crash into each other. The collision between the ship and the iceberg caused deadly damage below the water. The seventh word is survivor. A survivor is a person who stays alive after a dangerous or deadly event. The Carpathia carried about 705 survivors safely to New York. The eighth and final word is wreck. A wreck is what remains of something, like a ship, after it is destroyed. Explorers found the wreck of the Titanic deep on the ocean floor in 1985. That brings us to the end of today's story. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Titanic and picked up some useful new words along the way. Try using words like voyage, survivor, and collision in your own sentences this week. It really helps the new words stick in your memory. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care and keep learning.